Pranjal Sharma. I'm an author based in New Delhi, India. And today I'm going to be in conversation with Liam Jones, agency CEO at Mosaic Insurance. And we're going to be discussing the theme of partnership with purpose, leveraging technology and innovation. Liam joins us from London. Thanks, Liam, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I didn't realize that I was the first, so that's always an honor, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and you sort of set the pace for others who will follow. So, as a good leader, I'm sure you'll do the right thing.
I'll try my best.
So, Mosaic's business model is built on partnerships. Now, these partnerships, by itself are not new, but I think their shape and form are constantly evolving. Can you share some kind of examples on how these partnerships are operating and how they're enhancing the service delivery for you and, of course, keeping you competitive?
Sure. So I think it's worth taking just a little bit of a step back to talk about the model of Mosaic because it speaks to the partnerships. So, in insurance, generally, there are two ways you can go if you want to start a company. Mosaic was founded in 2021, and you can either raise $1 billion or whatever the amount is and start your own insurance balance sheet to take risk. Or typically you can start what's known as an MGA, a managing general agency, whereby you supply the kind of underwriters and the know-how, and you get a third party to support you from a risk-taking perspective, and they pay you a fee to do so. Mosaic is a hybrid of the two. So when we started Mosaic in 2021, we started our own Lloyd's syndicate, Mosaic Syndicate 1609. And at the same time, we started an agency business. So we have an agency that is 7 countries around the world, 7 lines of business, all specialty. So we don't write any property insurance, as you would typically see. And we today distribute that via, like I say, our service company network. So the agency is essentially the operating company of Mosaic. And our syndicate is the lead underwriter within that agency. So rather than the agency having a third party as their underwriter, we are ourselves, our own syndicate is the lead, and then we join other people alongside us in a kind of typical agency fashion. So today we have nearly 30 other carriers that support us around the world, which is extremely rare. And if we hit our plans for 2025, it will be roughly 800 million in premium. So there's a huge amount to manage. So, when we talk about partnership and, its uses, it goes beyond use for Mosaic. It is fundamentally what we are. We are a partnership model. And that extends also to technology. So I think right at the beginning, the kind of core of Mosaic, we realized that, our strong suit as a leadership team is in underwriting and building underwriting businesses, underwriting and claims. We have authority for both of those sides of the coin. And, what our strong suit isn't, actually, I think this is true for lots of the insurance industry. Our strong suit is not building tech capabilities. I think we've all worked for businesses where we thought maybe we were better off building ourselves, and in my experience, that's never true. So, we decided early to partner with a couple of very important broad scale businesses to help support the technology and operational side of our business. And really what that's done is allowed us to scale quickly, but also on a really consistent basis in a way that I don't think we would be able to do if we were trying to scale the underwriting and the market side of our business, as well as the technology and the people and the process all at the same time. I don't think we would be where we are today and delivering the value to our partners in the way we are if we hadn't started in that kind of partnership model. So it's been really fundamental in our story. We're only 4 years old, but we're already kind of extremely proud of where the business is, of our 200 plus people around the world. And I think, like I say, if you walk into any of our office, thank you to Rosemary Jones, our kind of head of PR. Every office has partnership with purpose written on the wall, and you can take that for what it means, but it really is central to what we do.
It's very impressive that in 4 years you have 800 million of premium. That's quite impressive. But for a person who may not be in the insurance industry, how would you say is your model unique to what the traditional model has been? Before we talk about how technology is enabling it.
Um, I think we like to think we're one of the first to do it at scale. I think it's been done in terms of having a kind of agency and a host capacity. It's been done on a small scale. We had the previous business I worked for in Bermuda had a similar structure, but on a small scale. But in terms of doing it globally, to this scale from a premium perspective with this many partners, I'm not aware of another that does it so meaningfully. And quite often there are other models out there now that have a syndicate. I won't name check them, but some of the insurance people listening to this would know who they are. I think our difference is that we retain so much of that risk ourselves. So, for our partners, we want them to know that even on our worst day, that we're alongside them. And, when we retain as much exposure as we do, 30, 40%, that's always going to be true. So when you're having a bad discussion about having a loss, which will always happen, right? We sell the promise to solve our clients' problems. When that happens, at least they know we're hurting as much as they are or more financially, and that we can all move on from that together. And I think that it's that makes us unique.
That's probably the core of it, that you're in tandem and you're in step with your partners, and you're not disconnected, because sometimes that happens when each company holds out for itself. But would it be fair to say that technology is enabling this in a far better way? I mean, if you were to have planned a model like this maybe a decade ago, perhaps the technology wasn't there. Would you say that technology is playing that really critical enabling role for you to build these partnerships and work with your partner?
Yeah, I think there are two things really fundamentally when it comes to how we're kind of engaging with our partners. There are two things that really support our proposition to them. One is profitable underwriting, and talk about that in a second. The second is service. So both of those things, have depending on what job you do, have a different lens. But the reality is that to produce profitable results in a way that our partners can't replicate from themselves, we need great distribution through our network. We need fantastic underwriters and claims people and finance, etc. But we need a great team. And then you need to kind of find an edge from an underwriting perspective. And I think it's that which, where the technology and our investment and innovation there will pay dividends over time. I think the reality is you can start a business like ours with fantastic people. You obviously need technology from an infrastructure perspective. But in terms of underwriting, you can get going with great people. I think to give it longevity and to continue to show value and to differentiate ourselves as a leader in the marketplace, technology is going to take an even more critical role because, really, I think our goal with technology in underwriting is to take fantastic people and augment them with clean, reliable insights that they can then build upon. I don't think our business will ever be a fully automated volume type business. It's just not what we do. We're very specialist, large, complex risk, but the game's always moving and the technology absolutely will take us there. I think on the service side, it's a similar story. What our clients want is a clean record of what we've underwritten for them, delivered with minimal errors on time, and we pay their premium across as soon as possible. And, being able to do that in a way that is, sustainable, scalable, repeatable. We'll pick another able if you'd wish. But it is massively important. So, our team has done a huge amount of work over the last 2 years nearly. Quickly, the team's done a huge amount of work since we started the company, but the initial phases was very much standing up everything that you can imagine we would need. But over the last 2 years, it's been kind of refocusing on, okay, what do we need to do from a service perspective? What do our partners need that they're not getting today? Or maybe they don't get it consistently. Unfortunately, it's probably not news to you, Pranjal, that, you can't be perfect from the beginning. I wish we could be, but, you can't be. But the technology side of that is massive, because if we can, reduce rekeying and reduce the human element of error, if we can have a kind of single path for data, even if it's consistently wrong, you only have to check it and change it in one place. If we can deliver data faster or process premium straight through using market infrastructure, which we do, then it all builds on that service side, and it just creates a partnership where, you're looking out of the front window rather than looking behind you and trying to figure out, what mess you may or may not have created. And we obviously aim for no mess, but when it's as complicated as our business, it's never always simple.
So actually, that's the key point, Liam. I think where technology can play a role, where artificial intelligence can play a role, because the complexity is the key issue which technology helps address and resolve. I think the point about being able to be perfect is valid. You can't be perfect, but what I think any company needs to be, especially a company like yours, which is breaking many barriers, is and creating new models, is to be relevant to the market. And as we all know, markets and the market ecosystem evolves with time, because technology feeds it. Consumers and customer expectation change. The regulatory environment also evolves over time because of various reasons. So to that extent, I think that AI would play a role in helping you manage these complexities. Is that something that you see? Are there any examples that you can share?
Quickly. Yeah, I think, again, I'll break it down into those two streams, underwriting and process. But, for us, so obviously, something that everybody's talking about, trying to get their head around what they do and why. For me, I think as an industry, we spend a lot of time almost trying to figure out how we use AI for the end game, which to me is not something that is going to bear any fruit for anybody anytime soon. So, we focus a lot more on what we can do in a short amount of time to kind of start the momentum towards that journey. So I think the most tangible example of the use of AI in underwriting for us is working with a third party. We've created what we call a kind of virtual junior underwriter. So it's trying to alleviate the work for the underwriters, all of the work they do at the beginning of the underwriting process, before they go near making a decision, before they think about pricing or terms. It's just the pure review of submission materials and kind of synthesizing a picture of risk that isn't just a score. It is a kind of natural language representation of that risk in a way that, we hope they would do in their heads. The goal is to replicate that kind of initial review of risk. That actually went live relatively recently for one of our lines of business, one of our largest. And it's really exciting. I think the team are really engaged. We had an initial launch the back end of last year, and it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be for lots of reasons. So that happens. We're talking about being perfect first time. It definitely doesn't happen. But went back, tweaked, learned, kind of innovated with our third party, and now we've relaunched. And it's really interesting, depending on the size of risk and the amount of data that is provided by the client or the amount of third party data that we have available, we cut the initial review time from anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour and a half, maybe, just through the fact that our underwriters have 30 different types of application form, or they might have supplementary data that's provided, or there's disclosures that are available on their websites that people have to hunt for and what have you. Now we can provide all of that information in a really digestible format in 2 minutes, roughly. And so now the underwriter is then reading the risk signals, deciding what else they want to look at, rather than just trawling through this base information. And then that's all based on the fact that the world of AI and the kind of large language models, etc., is moving at a lightning pace. So we're really excited about that. I think quickly, for a business like ours that is growing, not only does it benefit the people that use it today, it also changes our view of what does our workforce need to look like going forward. Do we need to hire quite as many underwriters? Can we, upskill our more junior underwriters to become, edge towards that underwriter track? It's a lot of ramifications for a business like ours. And we're blessed with the fact that we're relatively new and we can take advantage of those sides of the benefits, rather than some of these larger businesses or older or legacy businesses, whereby to get the benefit, maybe they have to have some kind of major HR discussion or figure out what they do next. So AI is really helping on that regard. I think on the processing and the technology side, operationally,
You said it well earlier when you said that you can't automate everything, and I think that's fair enough because it's not possible. But I like the thought and in the concept you shared of a virtual junior underwriter, and the time cycle that you have really crunched from, as you said, 90 to 30 minutes to just about a couple of minutes. That's absolutely brilliant, because it brings so much cost and process efficiency. But the question then remains about the data, right? Because in your business, like in many others, but specifically for you, to have accurate data is so critical, and to be able to manage that data, to be able to process that, analyze that at scale and at speed is really something of a twin challenge that you have to manage. How is that playing out?
So it's kind of playing out as we speak. So a couple of things. So one of the things we're blessed with, given our age, is that we're fully cloud based from day one. So all of our data is available, and I think the reality is, right at the beginning, when we were so busy building the platforms and hiring the people and launching the business, the foresight to design the perfect data infrastructure from day one, was probably far down the list. I'm sure one of our fantastic team brought it to the table, and us in hindsight as leadership probably should have listened to that more. But what is happening today is that we're kind of cleaning up our data infrastructure and getting it into a point where it's clean and it's tagged, and we can start to use it to train models, etc. And that work is ongoing at the moment and should be over in a relatively short time frame. But from the real question is, for me at least, and again, my career is always on the risk taking underwriting side of business before I kind of moved into management. But the real question is, what data do we need? We get a huge amount of data from brokers, submission data, but how much of it do we actually use? How much of it makes a real difference? And what do we, an underwriter makes decisions based on the data they're provided, but also experience. And all of those experiential kind of moments in time, there's a data point that's logged in someone's brain that only they can use. And I suppose one of the things that we're focusing on in the minute, depending on the line of business and the clients that we're talking about, is okay, well, what is it about their risks that really change their loss picture? What really changes the risk posture of one client versus another? And once you can identify that, you can then do the work to start to identify, okay, well, what are the data points that we need to understand those? Where do we then get those from? And then how do we use them? And that is something that, we have a development program within Mosaic where we pick, kind of rising stars and future leaders, and we designate specific real problems too, not kind of tabletop exercises. And this is one of the projects that's kicking off right now, is to understand, not just how we structure the data or how we access the data, but actually how do we create very valuable data? Because everybody has a stack of data they can use or look at least, but I'm not sure how much is really usable or valuable. So we're focused way more on that question at the moment.
Liam, when you say that, I think I've seen that across various industries and sectors. It's not just about in your business. The structure and design of capturing data, being able to process it, analyze it, store it, and then, of course, apply it, that becomes very critical, because you can also be burdened by data overkill. For instance, I mean, you could have a lot of data which is not relevant or quite pointless, because when you're collecting data, everybody just goes overboard on occasion. So in terms of this entire, if I would say the value chain of data, I would assume that it's a combination of human instinct, training, professionalism, and also the technology tools that is helping Mosaic in terms of managing the best data which is relevant for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can hire the best people. It's an interesting dynamic, and maybe it's not fully formed, but you can hire fantastic people, but we operate at global teams, right? So let's take cyber. Cyber operate in 6 of our 7 territories, so from the US all the way to Dubai and everywhere in between. And the reality is that you could have a team of fantastically skilled underwriters like we do, but every risk will have every risk when it comes in, depending on the underwriter, they'll all take a slightly different view of that risk because they have different experiences, or it's the relative kind of starting point of their understanding is different or whatever. And so one of the things that is really interesting about the AI use case that I'm talking about here with the virtual junior underwriter is you get a consistent start point, right? And that's really interesting because from there you can start to see, okay, well, over time, maybe this group of underwriters has been more profitable. They've all had the original start point. They're all fantastically experienced, but what is it about the data that they've then looked at that has changed their view of risk? And why does that mean that they're slightly less profitable or otherwise? It's things like that, which are, they are the kind of end game use cases I'm referring to. But that's where we make a huge difference when it comes to underwriting margin. And that's when, our partners benefit from that. And again, it creates this kind of virtuous cycle of, okay, Mosaic is not only, a fantastic business for its own account, but actually, they go above and beyond and they're producing better results. They deliver their premium on time to us as a partner. And ultimately, our insureds, our policyholders, are talking to underwriters that really understand their business. And for our policyholders and for their brokers, that's pretty much everything, right? Our business is to solve their problems should they arise, and we need to understand them fully before we can do that. So it's huge.
This virtual junior underwriter, I mean, what's the role, if you could unpack that a little bit? I mean, is this meant for your own team, as a support for your own team, or does it sometimes have a client-facing interface?
No, it's fully internal. Again, it's not designed to go anywhere near, replacing our people or changing decision making. It's way more about bringing people to that point where they can start to make decisions and start discussing things with clients sooner. Um, so no, it's fully internal. And for us, not every line of business will really be able to have this capability. It depends on multiple different factors. But this speaks to my point about getting rolling. You have to kind of move and learn and iterate, I think, with this kind of use case, then you can just kind of jump to the end games. But at the moment, it's all internal.
So, if I can draw an analogy on this, Liam, please correct me if I'm wrong. In manufacturing, for instance, on the assembly line, there are the fully automated robots, and then there are the cobots, which are the robots who work with humans. And I would think that what you're talking about is automation supporting your team. So in some ways, this process automation is like a collaborative tool which allows your team to get data faster, manage it sharper, and bring a decision at a much shorter time cycle. So in that sense, this process automation that you have is playing a critical role to add to the efficiency of your final objective.
Absolutely. And like I say, the reason that we focus so much on that strategy, I suppose, is one, all of the things that you've just mentioned. Um, but two, because of, again, the type of risk that we underwrite, wide and varied industries on a global basis, they and very large businesses typically, so inherently complicated. You know, the ability to automate the underwriting of that and then convince other people that they should support that is, I would think, I don't want to say impossible. I would never say impossible, but it would be an exponential amount of effort to be able to even get anywhere near that thought process. So, for our business, I think if you run an insurance business, which is, you know, let's call it cookie cutter, it's the same policy and you have the same data every time and you kind of move on, I think I would give you a very different answer. But for our business, getting to a risk decision is not a kind of linear A to B process. So to your point, if we can help just shorten the time that it takes to do the really kind of manual foundational piece of understanding of a risk, it's a huge benefit. So we are excited about it, but like I say, it's not the only thing that we're doing. It's just the most kind of obviously tangible thing that we're doing in AI at this point.
In terms of the industries, the range of industries, Liam, if you could sort of explain that a little bit, what are the range of sectors that you operate in? Because I would say that the risk associated with each sector is also very unique. So in effect, you're also looking at a range of risks which are also perhaps not just escalating, but they're multiplying because newer risks are emerging, which becomes critical for a company like yours to be able to read in advance.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you've hit essentially that is the $100 million question that as a leadership team we talk about pretty much every day. The risk environment. We write, like I said, 7 main core products. So it's mergers and acquisitions. So obviously hugely impacted at the moment by what's going on in the world. Cyber insurance, environmental liability, political risk, political violence, financial institutions, professional liability. So a really diverse range of products. We design it that way because it helps build a portfolio. But from an industry perspective, you could pretty much assume that every industry at some point could or may interact with our portfolio of risk. So, there really isn't anything out there that isn't off limits from a discussion point and a risk assessment perspective when it comes to looking at the overall portfolio.
In terms of
And I'll be honest, I don't think anybody's found I don't think anybody's found a really consistent way of kind of feeding macro information about all of those specific things to our portfolio or the next person's portfolio from a leadership perspective. We spend a lot of time sharing information between ourselves, pulling up articles, looking at research or attending conferences or talking to people like you, and then sharing that in ourselves. So I would say from a kind of strategic and leadership perspective, we probably haven't spent a huge amount of time thinking about how AI could help, augment leadership and portfolio steering at this point. But it's something that if we had the time and the bandwidth and the capabilities existed in a partner, we'd love to hear about it because, again, I think what I've found when it comes to partnership, specifically with technology, half of the battle is finding the capabilities in the first place. There's a lot of people in the world doing lots of outstanding things, and finding them, uncovering the diamond is always the challenge. So, if anybody has any thoughts, please do come and find me.
That's a
Quickly,
good point, Liam, because each of your partners would have its own assessment of risk and the reading of the market as it evolves. And that's actually the fascinating part that every 3 months, I think the risk profile for each sector changes. And you mentioned geographies, merger and acquisition. So each country, each market, and we see today that geopolitics plays such a huge role in the profile and management and assessment of risk that sometimes it's difficult to read. But that's where I think technology can play a role. So my final question to you, or a theme that I'd like you to talk about, is in an ever increasing complexity in the world that we see. If you look at, I remember the time when environment and climate crisis was the only risk, but then you have social issues, you have geopolitical issues, and of course you have market and regulatory risks also coming in. Um, do you see in the future that this sector, your sector, would increasingly find it very, very important to adopt and adapt to new technologies in many more functions that you are using today?
quickly, yeah, I think so. The answer to that, the easy answer to that is yes. Um, really ago though, it comes back to the point I was saying before around data and the value of the data that's available. I think who knows where it goes. My perception is that the technology will start to create insights that we just don't get, or we get them, but they're 3 months out of date, or they're inconsistent across geography, or any kind of variation on that theme. So I'm sure we have a huge distance to go when it comes to technology and how that really influences our view of the pace of change. But in the short to medium term, our focus is on how do we get the view of the world quicker and consistently. And by the way, it's okay for it to be consistently wrong as well. Like I say, you have to have a consistent start point, but you can then form a view around that. When you have this kind of volatility in views, that's where it becomes tricky to navigate. So I think I think there is no way the answer to your question, which is a very good one, by the way. There's no way the answer to that is no. It's only yes, and it's only going to get more powerful, more interesting as capabilities move forward. Like I say, we see so many fantastic capabilities come to us, like I was saying. But it's really about the underlying data and how much you can rely on it, and how much, therefore, our partners can rely on us because of what we're seeing. So that's the real challenge for me is understanding not the capability, it's the capability and the data that's coming through the output. So that's not an easy task, but we have a great team around the world that has produced something really quite special in my view in Mosaic, and I'm sure we'll figure out a way to do that, working with people like WNS and others.
Same, I'll be summarizing this, and just to close, I get from what you've been saying that it's technology is really now becoming the underpinnings for a collaborative partnership ecosystem where you pool information and data, make sure that it is something that can create actionable insights. But at the same time, you need the right kind of talent to be able to manage it, because while you may have virtual assistants, it's ultimately the human intelligence that has to combine smartly with artificial intelligence and automation. Because as the world gets more complex, I would assume that in your sector, this is going to be the key theme. How do you leverage better technology, combine it with the human instinct and skills to get the best results for your clients? So, Liam, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts and experiences. And I'd like to thank all of you for listening in and joining us in this conversation. I was talking to Liam Jones, Agency CEO at Mosaic Insurance. We'll continue such conversations on how hyper-automation and technology is powering the next wave of business transformation. Stay tuned for the next episode.